My name is Savannah Hayes. I'm 28 years old, and about 4 hours ago, I called off my wedding in the middle of a venue tour because my boyfriend looked at my sister like she was a flaw in a picture instead of a person. I keep replaying the moment in my head, and the strangest thing is how calm the room looked when everything inside me cracked open. The garden was immaculate, white roses climbing a trellis, late afternoon light spilling over stone pathways, a little fountain making that soft, expensive sound meant to convince people that love can be staged if you pay enough for it. The wedding coordinator had one of those polished smiles that never fully leaves her face, and I remember thinking how carefully arranged everything was. And then Ethan ruined it with one sentence. If you had asked me even this morning whether I trusted him, I would have said yes without hesitation. Not the fake kind of yes women give when they already know something is wrong and are trying to sound mature about it. A real yes, a deep one. The kind built slowly over 3 years. We'd been together that long, engaged for 8 months, wedding planned for October, 5 months away, deposits paid, save the dates mailed, families involved, money spent, future spoken about like it was already a fact. I thought we were building a life. I thought he loved the people I loved because that's what love does when it's real. It stretches. It makes room. Apparently, what we were building was much more fragile than that. My sister Rachel is one of the best people I know. I don't say that because she's my sister. I say it because it's true. She's funny in a way that sneaks up on you, kind without making a performance out of it, and stronger than most people who have never had to fight their own body just to exist in peace. She was diagnosed with a chronic condition when she was 19, and ever since then, weight has been something the world thinks it is entitled to discuss about her. Doctors, relatives, strangers with diet advice, women at church, men who think concern is the same thing as permission. Everybody with an opinion, everybody with a solution. Everybody acting like her body is a public problem waiting to be fixed. And through all of that, she has remained one of the gentlest people I have ever known. 3 years ago, when my own life collapsed, Rachel was the one who held me together. I had just lost my job. My relationship before Ethan had ended badly. I was barely sleeping, barely eating, barely functioning. I remember days when getting out of bed felt like lifting concrete with my bare hands. Rachel came over every day anyway. She brought groceries, made soup I didn't ask for, opened the curtains when I wanted everything dark, drove me to therapy when I was too numb to trust myself behind the wheel, sat on the floor beside my couch and talked about stupid reality shows until I remembered how to laugh. There are people who say they love you, and there are people who show up. Rachel showed up. So when Ethan proposed and we started talking about the wedding party, there was never a question in my mind. Rachel would stand beside me, not because I owed her, not because I was repaying some debt, because she belonged there, because she is my sister, because when I imagined one of the biggest days of my life, I imagined looking over and seeing her face. Ethan knew all of this. That's the part I can't stop thinking about. He knew what she meant to me. Today was supposed to be simple. Final walkthrough, ceremony placement, timeline questions, last-minute details before signing the final venue paperwork. We were following the coordinator through the ceremony space while she pointed out where the bridesmaids and groomsmen would stand. Ethan was taking notes on his phone. He'd been unusually focused all afternoon, asking about lighting angles and background balance, and where guests would be seated for the best photography lines. At the time, I thought he was just being thorough. Now I see it differently. The coordinator mentioned arranging the wedding party by height, so the ceremony photos would look symmetrical. Ethan nodded, almost absent-mindedly, then glanced at me and said, in the same tone someone might use to remind you to buy milk on the way home, "Oh, that reminds me. I've been meaning to talk to you about Rachel. She can't be a bridesmaid. She'll ruin the photos with her weight. I was thinking she could do a reading instead." I stopped walking. The coordinator stopped too. For 1 second, nobody moved. I could hear the fountain. I could hear a bird somewhere above us. I could hear my own heartbeat, hard and ugly in my ears. I turned to him slowly. "What did you just say?" He didn't look embarrassed. That might have been the worst part. He looked mildly inconvenienced, like I was making him repeat something obvious. "I said Rachel shouldn't be in the bridal party," he answered. "I've seen wedding photos where one person completely throws off the aesthetic. It changes the whole look. She can still be involved, obviously. I'm not saying she can't come. I just don't think she should be standing up there." Standing up there? Like my sister was a visual hazard. like her body was something to manage, like this was a logistics issue instead of cruelty. I stared at him, waiting for some sign that he heard himself, that the sentence had sounded monstrous once it entered the air, but Ethan just kept going. "Savannah, don't make that face," he said softly, almost patiently. "I'm not being mean, I'm being realistic. The photos are forever. I just want them to look good." The coordinator suddenly became very interested in her clipboard. I felt heat flood my face, then disappear just as fast, replaced by something colder, a steadier kind of anger. The kind that arrives when heartbreak and disgust hit at the exact same time. "You want to remove my sister from the wedding party," I said, "because you think she's too fat to be in your pictures." His jaw tightened. "That's not what I said." "That is exactly what you said." "No, you're twisting it." I laughed then, once. It didn't sound like me. He lowered his voice, as if that made him kinder. "She might even prefer it. Bridesmaid dresses are expensive, and honestly, she probably doesn't want the stress of squeezing into one." That was the moment something inside me went still. Not shattered, not exploded, stilled, like a door closing quietly. Because there are things people say in relationships that can maybe be talked through. Words said in fear, in grief, in anger. There are moments that can be unpacked and repaired. This was not one of them. This was a plan hiding inside a polite voice. I looked at the coordinator. She looked startled, like she already knew what was coming, but hoped she was wrong. "I'm sorry for wasting your time," I told her. "Please cancel everything. This wedding isn't happening." Her eyes widened. Ethan actually laughed, but it was thin and disbelieving. "What?" I turned to him. I said, "This wedding is over." His whole face changed then. Calm gave way to outrage so fast it almost made me dizzy. "You cannot be serious." I have never been more serious in my life. "Over this," he snapped. "Over your sister?" "Yes," I said. "Over my sister. Over the fact that you looked at someone I love and saw a body before you saw a human being. Over the fact that you thought I'd go along with it." His expression darkened. "Savannah, don't do this here." The irony of that almost knocked the breath out of me. "Don't do this here." As if I was the one who had chosen the place. As if he hadn't brought my sister's dignity into a manicured garden and laid it on the stone like something disposable. "We're done," I said, and I walked away. Behind me, I heard him call my name, then again, louder, then footsteps coming after me over the path. By the time I reached the parking lot, he was furious. He said I was overreacting, said I was throwing away 3 years over one comment, said I was humiliating him in front of a stranger, said we had too much invested to end things like this, that deposits had already been paid, that invitations had gone out, that his suit was fitted, that my parents had contributed $8,000 and his had given $12,000, as if money could make ugliness less ugly, as if cost could make character negotiable. I opened my car door. He stepped in front of it. For one split second, I saw the rest of my life with him in a flash, so sharp, it made me nauseous. Every future argument, every practical cruelty, every apology that wasn't really an apology, every day spent explaining to myself why what hurt me shouldn't hurt me that much. I looked at him and realized I did not want to spend one more hour being taught to betray my own instincts. He moved eventually. I got in the car and drove. Since then, he has called me 23 times. His mother has called 15. His sister has called 8. My phone is full of messages ranging from, "Please let me explain to your being irrational to you. We'll regret this." I haven't answered any of them. I called Rachel instead. I didn't tell her what happened. Not yet. I just told her I loved her. There was a pause on the line, soft and confused. Then she laughed a little and said, "Well, I love you too, weirdo." That almost broke me, because she still doesn't know that today, the man I was supposed to marry looked at her and saw something unworthy of being seen. And maybe the worst betrayal isn't the one that comes with shouting. Maybe it's the one that arrives dressed as taste. The first 48 hours after you end a wedding are surreal in a way I do not know how to explain unless you have lived it. It feels like the world keeps insisting on the version of your life that existed yesterday, while you are standing in the wreckage of something already dead. The next morning, I woke up fully dressed on top of my bed with my phone face down beside me and mascara dried into the corner of one eye. For a few peaceful seconds, I didn't remember. Then everything came back at once. The garden, Ethan's voice, Rachel's name in his mouth. The way the coordinator looked at her clipboard like paper could save her from discomfort. My stomach turned so hard I had to sit still and breathe through it. There were more messages waiting. Ethan had shifted tactics overnight. The angry texts from the parking lot had become softer by morning, almost desperate. He said he was sorry. He said he'd phrased it badly. He said emotions were high and we both needed to calm down. He said people say stupid things under stress. He said he loved me. He said 3 years shouldn't end over a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding. That word sat on the screen like an insult. Because misunderstandings happen when someone says one thing and means another. What happened at the venue was not that. Ethan had said exactly what he meant. In fact, the clarity of it was part of what made it so horrifying. He hadn't stumbled into cruelty. He had spoken with intention, calmly, casually, like he'd turned the conversation over in his mind before and chosen those words carefully. He wasn't apologizing because he understood why it was wrong. He was apologizing because I had refused to play along. Around 10 that morning, his mother called again. I stared at her name for a full 5 seconds before answering, mostly because I was tired of the noise and thought maybe if I engaged once it would stop. It did not stop. "What exactly do you think you're doing?" she demanded, not even pretending at concern. No hello, no pause, just outrage. I leaned back against my kitchen counter and closed my eyes. Ending a relationship with someone who thinks my sister is too fat to stand next to me at my own wedding. Silence. Then a sharp inhale. That is not what he said. I laughed softly, bitterly. I was there. I don't need it translated for me. He was trying to make the day beautiful. He was trying to humiliate my sister. Oh, don't be dramatic, Savannah. Every couple wants nice wedding photos. Nice photos do not require excluding family members. You are throwing away a future over one comment. No, I said. I'm refusing to build a future with someone who thinks cruelty becomes acceptable if you wrap it in the language of aesthetics. Her tone hardened. You embarrassed him, in public, over political correctness nonsense. There it was. Not regret. Not reflection. Just confirmation. The rot had roots. I stood there in my kitchen, sunlight coming through the blinds in thin stripes across the floor, and felt something strange settle into place inside me. Clarity, maybe. The kind that hurts but steadies you. Because when someone's mother hears what happened and her first instinct is to defend the cruelty instead of recoiling from it, you start to understand that this did not come out of nowhere. I'm done with this conversation, I said. You owe this family. I don't owe anyone an explanation for refusing to marry a man who would say that about my sister. Then I hung up. She called back 4 times. I did not answer. By early afternoon, I had moved from shock into administration, which is somehow worse. Heartbreak with a checklist attached to it. I called the venue first because I figured ripping the bandage off once was better than doing it slowly. Then the caterer, then the photographer. I kept my voice measured and polite every time, even though my hands shook between calls. Yes, the wedding was canceled. Yes, I understood the deposits were non-refundable. Yes, I was aware of the amounts. No, there was no need to reschedule. Thank you, you too. By the time I finished, the total loss sat in my chest like a brick. $14,000 gone. My parents had put in 8. His parents had contributed 12. Money that had been gathered around an imagined future, already swallowed by contracts and signatures and dates that would now mean nothing. I hated that part, not because it made me question what I'd done, but because practical loss has a way of making grief feel even more humiliating. Betrayal is bad enough. Betrayal with invoices feels almost obscene. I called my parents after that. My mother cried before I even got halfway through the story. Not loud crying. The kind mothers do when something hurts their child and they are trying to stay calm enough to keep listening. My father, on the other hand, got very quiet. When I finished, he said, "Then the money did its job." I frowned. "What?" "The 8,000, he said. "If it helped keep you from marrying someone like that, it was money well spent." That nearly undid me. Because there is something about being believed immediately that makes the pain hit all over again. No resistance, no devil's advocate, no careful neutral tone asking whether maybe there had been a misunderstanding. Just, I believe you, I'm with you, you did the right thing. My mother came over later with takeout I did not want and made me eat half of it anyway. She did not push. She did not ask questions I could not answer yet. She just sat with me on the couch and occasionally squeezed my hand. That kind of love is so quiet, you almost miss how powerful it is. Rachel texted around 6 that evening. "Mom said the wedding's off. You okay?" I stared at the message for a long time. Then I wrote back, "Not really, but I will be." She answered almost immediately. "Whatever happened, I'm here." There are texts that look small on a screen and land like a hand over your heart. That was one of them. I still couldn't tell her the reason. Not yet. I couldn't bear the thought of handing her those words, of watching them settle into all the old places where shame had already lived too long. I wanted to protect her from it for one more day. Maybe that was selfish. Maybe I needed the time as much as she did. The next morning, Ethan came to my apartment. I made the mistake of opening the door without checking first. I was tired, unwashed, wearing an old college sweatshirt and leggings, and for 1 second when I saw him standing there with red eyes and his jaw set tight, I felt not love, not longing, but exhaustion, so deep it was almost physical. "We need to talk," he said. "No, bossum." "No," I answered. He blinked, like the script in his head had already gone wrong. "Savannah." "No, you can't just shut me out." "I can, actually." His expression shifted, hurt first, then irritation hiding underneath it. 3 years, and you won't even let me explain. I folded my arms. "You already explained, at the venue, very clearly." "I said it badly." "No, you said it honestly." He exhaled hard. I was trying to think about the whole event. The photos, the way things come together, how it all looks. I almost laughed. "You are still doing it." "Doing what?" "Talking about my sister like she's an inconvenience in your design plan." His face tightened. "That is not fair." "Fair?" I repeated. "You stood in front of me and suggested demoting my sister from the wedding party because her body didn't match your vision." It wasn't a demotion. The fact that he said that out loud, still believing it, made something inside me go cold all over again. He stepped closer. I apologized. "No," I said quietly. "You apologized for how it sounded. You never apologized for thinking it." For the first time, he didn't answer right away. And in that pause, I understood something important. He still believed he was right. Maybe not tactically, maybe not socially, maybe not now that consequences were landing on him from every direction. But morally? Somewhere underneath the panic and embarrassment and damage control, he still believed his preference for beautiful photos was reasonable. He still believed my sister's exclusion was negotiable. He still believed my outrage was the more extreme thing in the room. "What do you want from me?" he asked finally, voice shaking now. The answer rose so fast it surprised me with its own simplicity. "Nothing," I said. "That's the point. I want nothing from you anymore." His eyes filled then. Real tears. I saw them. And because I am not made of stone, part of me flinched. 3 years is not nothing. You do not erase 3 years in an afternoon, no matter how necessary the ending is. There had been good moments. Road trips, late-night grocery runs, inside jokes, plans whispered in bed, ordinary tenderness. The kind of memories that do not disappear just because a person eventually reveals something ugly. But grief is not the same thing as doubt. You can mourn and still walk away. He looked at me like I was destroying him. "You're really going to throw all of this away over one comment about a wedding photo?" And there it was again. Not what he'd said, just the consequences. I looked at him for a long moment, taking in the face I had imagined growing old beside, and felt a kind of sadness so sharp it was almost peaceful. "It's not about the photo," I said. "It's about the fact that when you looked at someone I loved deeply, you saw a problem to be managed instead of a person to be honored. And you expected me to go along with it. That tells me everything I need to know." He wiped at his face angrily. "You're making me sound like a monster." "No," I said. "You did that yourself." He stared at me. Then his sadness curdled into something meaner. "You'll regret this," he said. "Do you know how hard it is to find someone who actually loves you, like I do? There are moments when people accidentally reveal themselves, not in the big scene, not in the original wound, but in the second after they realize they are losing control." That line did it. Not because it hurt, because it didn't. It just confirmed that ending things had not been impulsive. It had been necessary. I opened the door wider and stepped back. "You need to leave." For a second, I thought he might argue again. Instead, he just looked at me with something close to contempt, then turned and walked down the hall. When the door clicked shut behind him, I locked it immediately. Then I stood there in the silence and shook, not because I wanted him back. Because adrenaline leaves slowly when your body has been bracing for impact. I thought the worst part would be over after that. It wasn't. That afternoon, one of our mutual friends texted me. "Hey, I'm really sorry to ask this, but Ethan says you called off the wedding because you got scared. And there might have been someone else. I didn't want to believe it without asking you. Is any of that true?" I read the message twice, then a third time. For a few seconds, I just stood in my kitchen staring at it, feeling something heavy and disgusted settle in my chest. Not surprise, exactly. By then, I was already beginning to understand that Ethan's version of accountability was reputation management. Still, seeing the lie laid out that plainly did something ugly to me. He wasn't just trying to get me back. He was trying to get there first, to build the story before I could speak, to make himself the abandoned one, the loyal one, the confused one left holding broken plans, while his unstable fiancé spiraled into cold feet and betrayal. It was strategic. And suddenly the breakup felt less like a private collapse and more like the first move in something uglier. I wrote back carefully. No, that isn't true. I ended things because he told me he wanted my sister removed from the bridal party because of her weight. The typing bubble appeared almost immediately, then disappeared, then appeared again. By evening, 2 more mutual friends had reached out with versions of the same question. One tried to sound casual, one sounded openly suspicious. I gave them both the truth. Nothing theatrical, no embellishment, just facts. Some believed me, some clearly didn't. I could feel the story splitting in real time, people choosing which version felt easier to live with. And maybe that's one of the cruelest things about betrayal. Sometimes the wound is not only what happened, sometimes it's watching how many people are comfortable living in a lie if it is prettier than the truth. That night, I sat alone at my kitchen table with my phone face down and a legal pad in front of me, making a list, because lists make me feel less helpless. Deposits gone. Guest notice, send tomorrow. Vendor confirmation saved. His stuff, if any remains, box it. Ring, still in drawer. Rachel, tell her soon. I underlined that last one twice. Soon. Not because she needed the pain, because she deserved the truth before it found her some other way. Because if Ethan was already spinning lies to mutual friends, it would not stay contained for long. But I still wasn't ready. The words felt sharp in my mouth even before I spoke them. Your body was a problem in his eyes. He wanted you hidden for the pictures. I chose you. I knew she would hear the last part. I hated that she would ever have to hear the rest. Around midnight, another email came from Ethan's mother. This one was formal, clipped, almost absurdly polished in tone. She demanded repayment of the $12,000 their family had contributed, since I was, in her words, the party responsible for the unilateral cancellation of the wedding. I stared at the message, too tired to even be angry for a moment. Then I forwarded it to a lawyer friend from college with the subject line, "Please tell me this is nonsense." He answered the next morning in under 15 minutes. It was nonsense. Wedding contributions, he said, are generally considered gifts, unless there was a written agreement stating otherwise. No such agreement existed. The money had already been spent on wedding expenses. They had no real legal case. I responded to her with one sentence more polite than she deserved, that the funds had been given as gifts toward wedding expenses, had already been used for that purpose, and would not be reimbursed. Then I blocked her for the rest of the day. By the end of the second night, I realized something I had not let myself name yet. This was not going to stay a breakup. It was becoming a referendum on what counts as cruelty, on what counts as loyalty, on whether defending someone you love is noble or excessive depending on how inconvenient it makes the room. And somewhere underneath all of that, a quieter fear kept moving through me like a shadow. If Ethan could say something like that so easily, what else had he thought without saying? 3 days after the wedding fell apart, just as the noise was starting to settle into something dull and constant, I got a message that changed everything. It came through Instagram, from Ethan's sister. Her name is Lily Carter, and until that moment, our relationship had always been easy. Not close, not distant. The kind of connection you have with your partner's sibling when nothing is wrong. Polite dinners, occasional texts, shared jokes at family gatherings. She had always seemed thoughtful, observant in a quiet way. Her message was short. Hey, I know things are chaotic right now, but I really need to talk to you. Can we meet? There's something you should see. I stared at it for a long time. There are messages that feel like invitations, and messages that feel like doors. This felt like a door, and I didn't know what was on the other side. For a second, I wondered if this was a setup, a family intervention, another attempt to convince me I'd overreacted, that Ethan didn't mean it, that weddings make people say things they don't really believe. But something in the wording stopped me. There's something you should see. Not here. See? I replied, okay, coffee? We met that afternoon at a small cafe downtown, one of those places with mismatched chairs and too many plants, the air thick with espresso and low conversations. It felt like an odd place to dismantle whatever version of reality I was still holding on to. But maybe that's always how these things happen. Quiet spaces, ordinary settings, life breaking in places that look completely intact. Lily was already there when I arrived. She looked tense, not defensive, not confrontational, uncomfortable. She kept stirring her coffee even after the foam had disappeared, the spoon clinking softly against the ceramic cup in a rhythm that didn't quite match her breathing. I sat across from her. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then she said, "I'm not here to ask you to take him back." That alone made me sit up straighter. "I figured," I said carefully. She shook her head. No, I mean it. What he said about your sister, it was awful. I studied her face. You told him that? Yeah, she said. We had a huge fight about it. That surprised me more than I expected. And? I asked. She let out a breath that sounded almost tired. He doesn't think he did anything wrong. Of course he doesn't. The thought didn't even sting anymore. It just landed. He thinks people are just being overly sensitive, she continued. He said everyone cares about how weddings look, and he was just being honest about it. I looked down at my hands for a second, pressing my thumb into the edge of my palm until it hurt a little. Not enough to distract me, just enough to keep me grounded. That's not why you asked to meet, I said. She nodded slowly. No. Then she reached into her bag and pulled out her phone. For a second, she just held it there, like whatever was on the screen had weight. When she finally turned it toward me, her voice dropped. This happened before the venue tour. My stomach tightened. Before, I repeated. She nodded. 3 weeks before. And then I saw it. A group chat. 4 names at the top. Ethan, his mother, and 2 of his groomsmen. My eyes scanned the messages automatically at first, like I was reading something that belonged to someone else. Then the words started to sink in. Ethan, I've been thinking about how to tell Savannah her sister can't be in the wedding party. Any ideas? I blinked. Read it again. My chest went tight. He had written it so casually, like it was a logistics problem, like Rachel was an obstacle to work around. The next message was from his mother. You need to be smart about this. She's sensitive when it comes to her sister. Don't make it about Rachel directly. Make it about the photos. My fingers curled slightly against the table. The next message, one of the groomsmen, maybe suggests she do a reading or something instead. That way she still feels included. Another message, yeah, just say you want symmetry. People get weird about wedding aesthetics. It's normal. And then Ethan again. I'll bring it up during the venue walkthrough. She won't want to cause a scene in front of the coordinator. I stopped breathing. Actually stopped. For a full second, the world around me went quiet. The hum of the cafe, the clink of cups, the low murmur of conversations, everything pulled back like someone had turned down the volume on reality. I read that line again. She won't want to cause a scene. My throat felt dry. So, I said slowly, my voice sounding distant even to me, he planned it. Lily didn't answer right away. She didn't need to. Yes, she said finally. He planned it. Not a slip. Not a bad moment. Not a careless sentence. A strategy. A conversation. A coordinated effort between him, his mother, and his friends to figure out the best way to present something cruel in a way that would make me accept it. To trap me. To rely on my discomfort. To use politeness against me. I leaned back in my chair, the phone still in my hand, and felt something inside me shift in a way I can't fully describe. It wasn't shock. That had already happened. This was something colder, clearer, like the final piece of a puzzle clicking into place. Why are you showing me this? I asked. Lily met my eyes, and for the first time since I'd sat down, she didn't look uncertain. She looked steady, because what he's telling people isn't true. I let out a quiet, humorless breath. I figured that much. No, she said, shaking her head. I mean, he's saying you overreacted, that it was one comment, that you blew up over nothing. Of course he is. He's making himself the victim, she added softly, and you, the unstable one. That word hit harder than I expected, not because I believed it, but because I knew how easily people do. He knew it was wrong, she continued. That's why he didn't just say it. That's why he planned how to say it. That's why he picked the venue tour. He thought you'd go along with it if he made it sound reasonable enough. I looked down at the phone again. At the messages. At the version of Ethan that existed there. Controlled. Strategic. Carefully calculating how to manage my reaction. And suddenly, the argument at my apartment made more sense. The way he kept insisting it was about the photos. The way he focused on how I'd reacted, not what he'd done. The way his apology felt hollow. Because he hadn't been caught saying something he didn't mean. He'd been caught executing a plan. How did you get this? I asked quietly. Lily hesitated. After everything blew up, one of the guys in the chat felt bad, she said. He sent it to me. Said someone in the family should know the truth. I nodded slowly. And you decided that someone should be me? Yes. Why? That question hung in the air for a moment. Not accusatory. Just honest. She looked down at her hands, then back up at me. Because I have a daughter, she said. I blinked. She's 4, Lily continued. And one day, she's going to grow up in a world that already tells girls their worth is tied to how they look. I don't want her learning from my brother that it's okay to treat people like that, or worse, that it's normal. Her voice didn't shake. It didn't need to. If I stay quiet about this, she added, then I'm part of it. Something in my chest tightened. Not from pain, from recognition. Because that was exactly the line I had crossed in that garden. The moment where silence stopped being neutral. "What do you want me to do with it?" I asked. She shrugged slightly. "That's up to you. I'm not telling you to post it everywhere or start a war. But if people are going to believe one version of the story, maybe they should have the option to see the other one." I nodded slowly. "Fair. Measured. Not vengeful. Just honest." "Won't this cause problems for you?" I asked. She gave a small, almost sad smile. "It already has." I waited. "My mom thinks I'm betraying the family," she said. "Ethan won't talk to me. But—" She paused. "I'd rather deal with that than pretend this was okay." I sat there for a long moment, the phone still in my hand. The messages burned into my mind in a way I knew wouldn't fade anytime soon. Then I handed it back. "Thank you," I said. And I meant it. Not because it made things easier, but because it made them clear. I left the cafe with the strange mix of emotions swirling through me. Anger, relief, disgust, and something that felt dangerously close to validation. Not the shallow kind, the deeper kind. The kind that tells you your instincts were right, even when people tried to convince you they weren't. That night, I sat on my couch and thought about what to do. Posting the screenshots publicly would have been easy, tempting even. A clean way to shut down the rumors, to expose the truth in a way no one could ignore. But it also would have turned everything into something louder, messier, more performative. And I didn't want that. This wasn't about revenge. It was about truth. So I made a different choice. I sent the screenshots privately. Only to the people who had reached out. The ones who had asked. The ones who seemed like they actually wanted to understand what had happened, not just pick a side based on convenience. And then I waited. The responses came slowly. Then all at once. Shock. Apologies. Silence from some. One message read, "I am so sorry I doubted you. This is worse than I thought." Another, "I always felt like something was off about how he talked about people. I just couldn't put my finger on it." One friend told me she was cutting contact with him entirely. Another said she felt sick reading it. The narrative started to shift. Not dramatically, not publicly, but quietly. In conversations. In texts. In the spaces where truth moves slower, but sticks deeper. And for the first time since everything had happened, I felt like I wasn't fighting a ghost anymore. I wasn't trying to prove something invisible. The truth had weight now, and people could feel it. The last message I got that night was from Ethan. Short. Sharp. "I hope you're happy. You've destroyed my reputation." I stared at it for a long time. Then I put my phone down, because there was nothing left to say to someone who still believed the problem was being exposed, not what he had done. 10 days after everything fell apart, the world didn't look broken anymore. That's the strange thing about life. It doesn't pause just because something inside you does. The sun still rises, people still go to work, coffee still tastes the same. And somewhere in the middle of all that normalcy, you realize you're still standing, just different. The financial damage settled first. $14,000. Gone. Non-refundable deposits absorbed by a wedding that would never exist. My parents refused to let me feel guilty about their contribution. My dad repeated the same sentence every time it came up, like a quiet mantra. Better money lost than a life wasted. Ethan's family stopped emailing after their lawyer confirmed what mine had already told me, that they had no case. The $12,000 they contributed had already been spent on the same deposits. There was nothing to reclaim except their pride, and even that seemed out of reach. So that part ended, cleanly if not. The social aftermath was messier. There were still people who believed his version. Still people who thought I'd overreacted, that I'd thrown away a relationship over one poorly worded comment. That I should have talked it through, given him a chance, been more understanding. I let them. Because I learned something important through all of this. Not everyone deserves access to your truth. Some people aren't looking for it. They're looking for the version that makes them most comfortable. And if the truth requires them to confront something ugly about someone they like, about themselves, about the way they've tolerated things before, they won't choose it. And that's fine. Those people quietly removed themselves from my life. Not through confrontation. Not through arguments. Just distance. The ones who stayed, the ones who asked questions, who read the messages, who sat with the discomfort instead of avoiding it, those were the ones who mattered. Everything else was noise. Lily and I stayed in touch. Not constantly. Not in a forced, we went through something together kind of way. Just occasionally. Checking in. Small messages. A kind of quiet understanding between two people who had chosen the same side of a line. She told me her mother wasn't speaking to her, that Ethan had blocked her, that family dinners had become tense, divided, fragile. "I knew it would be like this," she said once over text. "I just didn't think it would feel this Final. I understood what she meant, because choosing what's right doesn't always feel triumphant. Sometimes it just feels like loss. You did the right thing, I told her. I know, she replied. I just wish it didn't cost so much. Yeah, me too. 5 days after the cafe, I finally told Rachel the truth. We were sitting in her living room, the TV on low in the background. Some reality dating show neither of us was really watching. She had her legs tucked under her, a blanket draped over her lap, a half-empty bowl of popcorn resting against her hip. Normal. Everything looked normal, and I was about to break that. I need to tell you something, I said. She muted the TV immediately. No hesitation. No jokes. Just attention. What's wrong? I took a breath, then another, and then I told her. Not all at once. I couldn't. The words came out uneven, like they had edges. I told her what Ethan said at the venue, about the photos, about the suggestion that she step down, about the reading, about the way he framed it like it was practical instead of cruel. I didn't tell her everything. Not about the group chat, not about the planning. Not yet. Some truths can wait. Some don't need to be handed over all at once. When I finished, the room was quiet. Rachel didn't move, didn't speak, just sat there for a long time. Then she said very softly, I always felt like he looked at me a little differently. My chest tightened. What do you mean? She shrugged, but it wasn't casual. It was protective. I don't know, just little things. The way he'd pause before hugging me. The way he'd kind of scan the room sometimes when we were out, like he was measuring something. I told myself I was imagining it. You weren't, I said. She nodded slowly. I guess part of me knew. That hurt more than anything else. Not what Ethan said. Not the wedding. Not the money. That. Because she had felt it. And she had chosen to ignore it. Because that's what people do when they don't want to be a problem. When the world has already told them too many times that they take up too much space. I'm sorry, I said. For what? For not seeing it sooner. She looked at me then. Really looked. And something in her expression shifted. Not hurt. Not anger. Something steadier. You saw it when it mattered, she said. My throat tightened. I chose you, I whispered. She smiled a little, but her eyes filled. I know. And then she reached over and took my hand. We sat there like that for a while. No big speeches. No dramatic moment. Just quiet. The kind of quiet that heals something small but important. Later that night, after she fell asleep on the couch and I draped a blanket over her like she used to do for me, I stood in her kitchen and realized something I hadn't fully let myself feel yet. I wasn't just relieved. I was proud. Not in a loud, self-congratulatory way. In a quiet, grounded way. Because I had chosen correctly. Even when it was expensive. Even when it was messy. Even when it meant standing alone for a while. And that matters. Ethan sent one final message 2 days later. You turned my family against me, all because I wanted a nice wedding. This is who you are. I read it once. Then I deleted it. Because there is nothing to argue with in a sentence like that. No misunderstanding to clear up. No middle ground to find. Just a fundamental difference in what we believed mattered. And that had already been decided. I started therapy that week. Not because I was falling apart. Because I wanted to understand why I almost stayed with someone who thought like that. Why I ignored small signs. Why I explained things away. Why I needed something that obvious to finally draw a line. My therapist told me something in our second session that stuck. You didn't ignore the signs, she said. You deprioritized them. There's a difference. That landed. Because she was right. I had seen things. Little comments about other women. Subtle judgments disguised as observations. A certain way of looking at people that always felt just slightly off. I just didn't treat them as important. Not until they collided with something I loved too much to compromise. Rachel came over for dinner a few nights later. We made pasta. Burned the garlic a little. Argued about which reality show couple was the most delusional. Normal. Comfortable. Ours. At one point, she looked around my apartment and said, It feels different here. Better or worse? I asked. She thought about it. Lighter, she said. I smiled. Yeah, I said. I think so too. After she left, I opened my desk drawer. The ring was still there. Exactly where I'd put it the night everything ended. For a second, I just stared at it. All that symbolism. All that promise. All that future. Reduced to an object sitting quietly in a drawer. I picked it up, turned it over in my hand, then set it back down. I didn't need to decide what to do with it yet. Some things don't need immediate resolution. Some things can just sit and lose their power slowly. Before I went to bed, I stood in front of the mirror and studied my reflection. Same face, same life. But something underneath had shifted. Stronger, maybe, or just clearer. I thought about everything that had happened. The garden, the sentence, the choice, the fallout, the truth. And I realized something simple. I didn't lose a wedding. I didn't lose a future. I avoided the wrong one. And if there's one thing I'll take from all of this, it's this. Some things matter more than looking good in pictures. And sometimes the most important thing you can do is refuse to stand beside someone who doesn't understand that.